weei.com. How you doing, Scott?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good to see you. It's been a while. I feel like you come out of your cave when hockey season starts back up.
I know. We would always have the Sunday morning overlap.
That's right. Yes, and I don't know if same thing will be because we got football Sunday, and then you'll be coming in before then. Or no, you don't come on until the football season's over, right?
Yeah, we don't get to talk about hockey until football's over.
That's when Swayman might show up, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It'll coincide with that exact thing. Let's go ahead and start with the offseason because I feel like not just you, but a lot of Bruins beat writers, people around the team, people close to the team, we're all saying, don't worry about this. This isn't a big deal. They'll eventually come together on a day where they're far apart right now, but this is not a very tense situation, and it's being overblown a little bit. And now here we are. It's threat level midnight, and how do we get here?
Well, it wasn't very tense for a lot of the summer because they weren't really doing anything. They weren't talking. Everyone was just kind of enjoying summer vacation. I am pretty stunned that it's gotten to this point because it made too much sense in the world to get this done. Like, Jeremy Swayman is in a great situation with a team that's always in contention, where he loves his teammates, he loves the city, he wants to be here. Okay, great. He'll figure something out. The Bruins need him. They traded Linus Ullmark away. Of course they're going to sign Swayman. So it always made a ton of sense to get it done. In my mind, the money always I think guys said at the end of last season, 8 years, $8 million, something right around that should get it done. And then you get all these reports that they're so far apart and, they might be as much as $3.5 million apart. Bruins are starting in the 6s, Swayman's starting in the 9s. And it's like, okay, well, common sense could still prevail and you could still meet at that 8 at some point. And now that is on the table. Cam Neely put it on the table publicly in a press conference. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Very aggressively put it on the table, right?
Yes.
In a way that generally, especially with this team and these guys, they don't do this in public very often.
No, hardly ever.
Right.
In fact, they're known around the league for not even leaking stuff in terms of contract negotiations. So, yeah, Don Sweeney would never have done that. Cam Neely is the blunt object, the hammer, who will, if he has something to say, he's going to say it. He's not leaking stuff out. If he wants to get it out there, he's just going to do that and say it in a press conference. But yeah, it is rare. It's rare for them. It's rare for anyone. No one goes public with numbers while a deal's still being negotiated.
So who started the pissing contest? Because we've had Brian put together a nice sort of back and forth timeline. Was it Swayman going on that podcast and him amping it up? Is it the Brew? When did this become seemingly sort of personal and not just numbers anymore?
Well, I think you go back to last year and you go back to the arbitration hearing, which the nature of an arbitration hearing is that it's going to be very uncomfortable for people, especially the player.
Right.
Who, by the way, didn't have to go. You don't have to attend your own arbitration hearing.
But he went to business school.
Right. He wanted to, so he had to have known what he was getting himself into. I'm sure his agent explained it. If he didn't, bad job by the agent. But, if you go into that hearing, you're going to hear things you don't want to hear. So he knew that, and then he did seem, by all accounts, to take it pretty personally because he brought it up multiple times throughout the season, unprompted. Gets asked about going to the All-Star game, and the first thing he mentions is arbitration. This is in February.
Right.
So clearly there were really hurt feelings, and I think that only carried over into this summer where, they were starting from a place this summer of we're still hurt from that whole process last year. So Swayman goes on a podcast and talks about not wanting to ruin the market. That was probably the start of these negotiations kind of leaking out into the public. And then you have the whole rumor game with Spittin' Chicklets and all that. Sweeney goes after them, and now Neely's coming public with the offer. So, I guess maybe you say Swayman started it this summer, but this really all goes back to last year.
In your opinion, in your professional opinion, do the Bruins believe in Jeremy Swayman? Because you can make the argument that they've shown multiple play over the course of the last 3 years that both on and off the ice that maybe they don't really. Maybe they like him. They think he's probably their best goalie. But in terms of believing in him and wanting to give him a solid, Sorokin-type contract, they don't believe in him as that player to take the workload on, to be in the playoffs, and so forth. Would you agree with that?
I think they believe in him. I think what they don't believe is that any goalie's worth $9 or $10 million. And that is a prevailing theme across a lot of NHL front offices who saw Carey Price sign a massive deal and not even get to the end of it, saw Sergei Bobrovsky sign a massive deal, be very inconsistent before, yes, winning a Stanley Cup this year. But even within that run, there was inconsistency, right? Like, as the Oilers are coming back in that final, Bobrovsky's choking.
He did, yeah.
And if they lose that Game 7, he's now an all-time choker. Instead, he steps up, they win, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion. But I think those kind of deals have scared teams off from going that high on goalies, and you see it because it's now been a while since anyone's gotten that kind of contract. Igor Shesterkin probably will. But that's the exception to the rule in the NHL right now.
Right, and I think Swayman thinks that he's part of that exception and should be getting paid that way. Maybe not in the $10 million, but you're talking about them being afraid of $10 million. They're offering $6.25. Like, they offered him in his mind, and I think in a lot of other people's, a very low starting point, and aren't coming up as much as I expected them to.
Well, they've come up a lot. I mean, if they
starting at 6.2, yeah, but that's still,
they're at 8 now. So however you got there, you're there now.
Right.
Like, you can say it was
I just don't think it's magnanimous to come up from an insulting offer and be like, well, we came up so far. It's like, well, yeah, the offer was insulting.
Yeah, but you got to 8. I mean, where do you want to get to? 9?
Eventually, when you had to blurt it out in the middle of a press conference.
Well, then it was. So, do you believe that to be, as we've accepted it, that Cam Neely was rounding up from 7.8 to 8?
That's certainly what it seems like.
Okay.
Yeah. But, again, it's on the table. Like, you can't now go back and be like, oh, actually, our offer's still 7.8. Like, no, the offer's 8 now.
Sure, but he's not taking 8 either, clearly, at this point.
Not yet. They're taking a couple days to reset and decide what they want to do.
And I don't blame him either, because, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if he told him to go bleep
Team
off.
Swayman,
Swayman, 100%.
I'm Team Bruins. I think Swayman started this all out. I didn't care for the whole set the market thing. It reminded me of Papelbon. It reminded me of, like, quarterbacks in the NFL where the next guy is always going to have the biggest deal, whether he's the best or not. And I was like, well, A, this isn't the NFL. B, you're not a quarterback, you're a goalie. Like, there's some differences here. I don't care what they taught you at business school in Maine. So it seems personal. He seems to have an inflated value of himself or view of himself, right? Are those accurate? Can I go with those two?
I think he's very confident. I think he believes he's going to be the best goalie in the NHL.
So is he going to be traded?
I don't think so. I don't see how it happens. Like, unless they get absolutely blown away. First off, no team has submitted an offer sheet for him.
Yep.
He's a restricted free agent, but he can talk to other teams. So he can feel around, see if there's any team out there that's going to offer sheet him. No one has. It would be surprising if someone does it now. Like, we're too close to the season.
Mm-hmm.
Only 4 teams can even approach what he wants either, and that's San Jose, Calgary, Anaheim, and Columbus. I've heard keep an eye on Anaheim from various people, but yeah, I think that at this point, and other people, Fluto and other people have pointed this out, camp's over, the season's about to start, and people have their goalies locked in.
Well, and if Jeremy Swayman requests a trade, he does not have any trade protection. Now, in theory, the Bruins could send him anywhere, but obviously you're going to get more if he's actually going to sign there, right? Like, you're not just going to trade his rights for a second-round pick and then say, okay, you can go negotiate with him. No, you're only going to trade him if there's a deal worked out and you're getting a massive haul in return. I just don't think that's going to happen at this point. So, to me, like, Swayman's only real option for this year is playing for the Bruins. And whether that ends up being this long-term deal that, all things considered, like, all this bluster of this week aside, based on the reporting, it does actually seem like they're not that far apart, right? Like, if the Bruins are at 8
$250,000 is what it seems like the holdup is at this point, right?
Bruins are at 8. Frank Saravalli reports 8.5. Elliot Friedman reports Swayman's at high 8s or 9. So it's like they're less than $1 million apart per season. Now, that's not nothing, but they're not $3 to $4 million apart anymore. So if you can put the hurt feelings aside, like, there is a deal there to be made. The question is, can Jeremy Swayman do that, or have the Bruins pushed him to a point where he just wants out and doesn't want to deal with them anymore? And that's what he's going to have to decide, because, if he decides he can't deal with this organization anymore, then now you are in that scenario of looking for, okay, what team is going to pay him like that and is also going to give the Bruins enough in a trade to make that worth their while.
Is there any chance of a shorter term bridge deal or get through it or 1 million, 1 year, like anything?
Demko and Saros and those guys, they all sign deals like that.
Yeah, I had thought that would be an option if you can't figure out the longer term deal, but yet all the reporting like from people like Elliot Friedman is both sides are still focused on an 8-year deal.
Right.
So it seems like the years are the one thing that they can agree on. You know, Swayman wants a long-term security. Bruins maybe started at a lesser term, but are now okay going to 8. So I don't think you'd go to a bridge deal at this point because, you know, if you both want 8 years, like why would you now go shorter?
Right.
And then try to figure out that whole salary and like it just becomes a mess again.
If I thought I read this maybe in Porter today, can Swayman go play overseas?
I mean, I guess he could.
Like if he holds out this year, could he do that, or would the Bruins say no, you can't play anywhere else? You're still our player.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know what the rule is for a restricted free agent.
Okay. Well, with that being said, is Jeremy Swayman a top 5, top 10 goalie in the league? What do you think he is?
Definitely top 10, probably top 5. I mean, he finished 7th in Vezina Trophy voting, but that's only because he didn't play as many games as some other guys. I think if he had started 55 games last year and put up the numbers he did, he would have been top 5. And then he was the best goalie in the playoffs. So
he's the best player in the playoffs for 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Jesus.
He was.
No, he was. I'll agree with that.
Nobody's
Conn
like,
Smythe, he was at the top of the list.
It's like it's his kid or his client. He's like, now we got to hop in with how great Swayman
Well,
is.
it's my take that I'm defending, which, sorry, I'm bludgeoning you with it, but that's what it is.
How much are you getting?
I'm not getting anything. I think the Bruins botched this. I do.
So we know for a fact he will not be the opening night goalie. How big a deal is that?
It's not that big of a deal yet. I think it's a big deal if it lingers and you're talking about playing a month without him, going into November without him. It becomes a big deal if the goalies you have struggle, right?
Do you think that's going to happen?
Korpisalo has looked good so far in camp and in his preseason games. I kind of think he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be great. He's not going to be Swayman or Ullmark. I think he'll be fine. I don't think you're going to get a couple weeks into the season and be like, oh my God, Korpisalo's a disaster. But he can't play every game, so you do need a second goalie at some point. And Brandon Bussey looked better Tuesday night, had struggled his first 2 preseason starts. They just claimed a goalie off waivers.
Patera.
Yuri Patera.
Mm-hmm.
I know him well.
From Vancouver. Yeah, but I'm also very familiar with his work.
Love Pantera.
Yeah. I saw them home from Metallica this summer. They were great. No, so now he's going to come in. I guess he's going to compete with Bussey for the backup job. But if Swayman's out long enough, one of those guys is going to have to play at some point. And does that turn into a disaster? Like now do you have to start riding Korpisalo every game, which I think was part of the problem in Ottawa last year, was he had a way heavier workload than he'd ever had before. So it could become a problem pretty quickly, but it's not on opening night, I don't think.
Are they leaning on the idea, because we hear this from fans, that they're a better team, better franchise, they're set up better, and goalie Bob magic dust puts it on Korpisalo, and like all of a sudden he's this great goalie and he's better than Ullmark or whatever?
I don't know if they believe that. I think there are fans who believe that. I don't buy it. I've heard that from so many people that like Korpisalo is just Ullmark before Ullmark got here. And it's like, not true. Dig into the analytics. Ullmark's analytics, the deeper metrics in Buffalo, were pretty good. He was just on a bad team. Korpisalo's analytics, 3 of the last 4 years, not good at all.
He was a bad goalie on a bad team.
He had one really, really good year, 22-23, between Columbus and Los Angeles. But the other 3 of the last 4, whether you're talking basic numbers, underlying, advanced, whatever, aren't good. So that is very different than Ullmark.
All right, before we let you go here, Scott, are the Bruins a playoff team with those 2 goalies and without Swayman?
Yes, but it's close.
Like a fringe playoff team.
Yeah, like they're in the wild card race. Whereas with Swayman, I think they're a Stanley Cup contender.
Really?
Oh, hey
Interesting.
now. What are you so surprised? You love the goalie.
Well, no, they weren't a Stanley Cup contender last year, but you liked their offseason then.
Outside
of this obvious Swayman debacle, but the rest of the offseason you liked.
Yeah, I think they are now a more playoff-ready team than they were last year. They are going to play a style that I think will fit better in a matchup against the Florida Panthers specifically, but also against other playoff teams. So, but your strength is supposed to be your defense and goaltending. So goaltending needs to be a strength. With Swayman, it is. Without him, I think you're fighting an uphill fight there.
All right. The leverage is on the side of Swayman there. Like, if you're right,
in a sense,
and the Bruins go from borderline playoff team to cup contender because, like, sign the damn goal.
Well, is that more leverage than Swayman not making money this year? I mean, that's what you're weighing it against.
I don't know,
It's
wasting an
things.
entire season, a Brad Marchand season, like whatever. Like, you can't waste a whole season if you're a legit cup contender. And Scott says they're a cup contender,
but
and I'm holding him to it.
The Bruins organization has been just fine with them being a fringe playoff team for about 20 years now. So, I mean, like one round in the playoffs and, turn off the lights, and they've been okay with that. For the most part, would you agree? The Jacobs, they don't seem like they've been pushing for too much more than that.
I don't know. They've won an awful lot of games. They've won They won the most games in the league since Sweeney became GM.
Right.
So,
and they're content with winning a lot of regular season games.
Yeah, they've had some great regular seasons. They have, until the last couple of years, they were pretty consistently at least getting out of the first round.
And they've been aggressive at trade deadlines more than any other team.
Deadline, that's when Sweeney's at his best, I think, is at the trade deadline.
I mean, the 22-23 season, they went over the cap and had all those carryover bonuses that hurt them the next year. Like, they've been as competitive financially as anyone in the league. So.
All right. Well, we'll leave it right there then. Scott McLaughlin, great to talk with you. We look forward to your coverage of this Jeremy Swayman situation here and all your Bruins coverage going forward. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. That is Scott McLaughlin, weei.com. He covers the Bruins, does some great